Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Between the Eers. I'm Schuyler Callihan. That is Christopher Hall. Make sure you hit that subscribe button here on our YouTube page at West Virginia on SI. A reminder, tomorrow we will have the Walkthrough Game Day show with Eugene Napoleon breaking down West Virginia and Oklahoma State in greater detail. But we're going to get Chris's thoughts on this game as well with his keys to the game and what to watch for. So, without further ado, Chris, let's go ahead and dive right into this thing. West Virginia's offense, Oklahoma State's defense, kind of the main areas that you're looking for and where West Virginia can really kind of take advantage of this Cowboy defense who really has really struggled all year, but really had a tough time defending the run game, especially with Avery Johnson last week. Mike Gundy talked about it in his press conference on Monday about how they had troubles kind of containing the quarterback run game and how that might be an issue here again this week against Garrett Green, who finally started to use his legs a couple of weeks ago against Kansas.
Yeah, Oklahoma State is definitely an interesting case study right now. It's hard to imagine a defense has been worse, but here's Oklahoma State. They
Yeah.
have struggled to stop offenses where they've been good. Remember, they're traditionally good at. Neil Brown highlighted it on Monday. Is takeaways and red zone defense. They're allowing teams to go down the field, but they're keeping them out of the end zone per se. Um, they didn't against Kansas State. Of course, Kansas State had a lot of proof coming into that weekend after getting uh, beat down. It was a BYU, I believe they got beat down by BYU pretty well. So coming back off that loss had a lot to prove. Maybe had something to do it. Then you could kind of look at Oklahoma State. So did they against an Oklahoma team. They only put up 19 points. They held Utah to 22, but you're kind of looking at Utah and I'm like, well, they don't, what's going on with them offensively? So,
Yeah.
still racked up a bunch of yards, but really, it's not as goofy as it sounds and the cliche as it sounds. Take care of the ball, you know, win the
Which
turnover
is
battle,
something they
I
have
guess.
not done. I mean,
Um,
it's been an issue.
and this is where we talked about with Justin Robinson. This if he gets to play this week, red zone is going to be critical. Again, that's cliche. Every week you got to score touchdowns in the red zone, but it's going to be really key this week because the Oklahoma State defense bows up. They're one of the better red zone defenses in the country. I think really where you're going to have to score with this team is explosive plays, and
Explosive.
that's something that's just not been in West Virginia's arsenal the last few years. You're hoping with Jaden Bray going back home. He's from Norman, but grew up an Oklahoma State fan, went to Oklahoma State, going to be playing with in front of a lot of friends and family. You just hope that he has a big day down the sidelines. And hopefully Hudson Clement can continue his momentum from that Kansas game. And you got to get in the end zone. And if you have those, first and goal from the 8 or inside the 10-5, you have to capitalize. You have to win up front. And that's really what it is with this group. Win up front and control the clock. If you look at time of possession for West Virginia, they're one of the worst in the Big 12, one of the worst in the country. And you're going to have to kind of chew up clock and kind of force Oklahoma State offense to score. Been saying it all year since the defense has struggled. Some of you I said it a lot under Dana. Sometimes your best defense is a good offense. Put the pressure on that offense to score. Put pressure on Alabama to score. You don't have to strike in 4 or 5 plays, but you need to find the end zone. So yeah, another cliche thing: score more points than the opponent. Find the end zone. Don't settle for field goals once you get down there.
That was the stat that I was searching for before we hopped on because I had told you, I was like, man, I have so much stuff going on. I can't figure out where I put all my notes. That was one of the things that I wanted to talk about was time of possession. It's like I think a 4.5 or 5 minute difference from what they were a year ago. And they led the Big 12 and were towards the top in the country in time of possession. This year they're at like 26 or 27 minutes. It's not good. Like
The good news is Oklahoma State's worse. So I
right.
mean, it's like it's two teams. It's like, well, let's try to correct our worst this week. Fortunate for West Virginia, they've had a week off to kind of correct
Yeah.
some of the issues. Whereas Oklahoma State right now is reeling, and really it's a team right now that West Virginia was back against the wall. So was Kansas last week. They won that fist fight. Well, Oklahoma State
You'll have another one this week.
hasn't dropped 3 straight Big 12 games to open their conference slate since Gundy's first year in '05. So they're on the verge of doing something they haven't done nearly in 20 years. So yeah, it's going to be a fist fight. And where does it start? Up in the trenches. And talk about the running, and they've given up a lot of yards in the running game. You would have to think that with the way Garrett Green has played, Oklahoma State's going to load the box. So it's going to have, there's something that, that's going to be big for Green is we've seen him run the 2 minute offense and get out of the pocket. We talked about it last week during the bye week that he's got to be Garrett. He just
Yeah.
has to be Garrett. He can't try to prove that he's a pocket passer. He might be able to be a pocket passer, but that's just not where his strengths lie. His strengths lie on creating, making plays happen. That creating just
He's an
buy some time.
improviser.
Yeah, buy some time. Buy some time in the backfield. You don't have to necessarily just take off upfield, but buy some time, get out of the pocket because some of the sacks that he's taken hasn't necessarily been the offensive line's fault. He's just held the ball too long, and when the pocket collapses, the pocket collapses. He has nowhere to go, so he's got to get that count a little sped up, speed that count up in his head. Maybe first, second read, start to move outside the pocket and let his receivers work. So I think that's going to be a big category because Oklahoma State doesn't have a lot of sacks on the season. And again, you can kind of look at their schedule because of that. So they're going to definitely get after it and tee off on him. So he's going to have to move.
Yeah, and I mean, just to put some context around some of this, Oklahoma State is allowing 20 more passing yards than West Virginia. So we know how bad it's been here in Morgantown for the first month of
And
this
you can argue that West Virginia's opponents, passing
have
wise,
been,
have been better.
yes,
So,
1000%.
we didn't know Holstein was going to be what he is right now, right? With Pitt, we
Yeah,
knew Drew Willard who he was. We weren't real sure who the kid from Albany was. Come to find out, he got recruited
pretty
to
good.
Wisconsin, and the receiver was from Oregon, right? So they faced talent. So yeah, and again, Oklahoma State played a really good Kansas State team. Utah's offense, they're not great right now, but it's still a
Especially because they
formidable
don't have
quarterback
Cam
opposite,
Rising. Cam Rising's not
right?
even starting.
So it's one of those. It's shaping up to one of those old Dana Holgerson Big 12 Classic games where it's 48-51, but more than likely, when you think there's going to be a bunch of points, it's going to end
There's
up being
not.
a defensive battle. It's going to be like 20-17 or something crazy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, defenses are struggling coming into this game, but fortunate for West Virginia, they've had a bye to hopefully correct some issues. And really, when you look at it, they corrected a lot of issues against Kansas.
Yeah. And before we flip it over to the defense, Oklahoma State's run defense has been an issue, like we mentioned earlier. They're allowing 204 yards per game on the ground, which is dead
Worse
last
than
in
the
the Big
Big
12. Yeah.
One of the worst in the
And
country. I think I actually have that
if
pulled
you're
up.
if you're Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson and even Garrett Green, you got to be licking your chops when you see them on tape. And for Jaheim, like I think CJ's played about probably what we expected him to be. I think he's been okay. I think he could be better, but Jaheim White's got to get going. Like I feel like his big game, it's got to happen soon, and we're going to start getting into that conversation where, hey, there's a bit of a sophomore slumper. His team's figuring him out. Like I understand he's not going to be running for 7 or 8 yards a carry like he did a year ago. That was him coming out of nowhere, no one really knowing about him, not knowing how to game plan him. But he's got to learn how to navigate this transition from just being a guy on the scouting report to being the guy on the scouting report. And that's a tough transition for some guys, especially when you're in your second year. But Chad Scott talked about it. Like, hopefully, it's this week where he kind of turns the corner and has his breakout game. But on paper, it's a great opportunity for him to.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma State's defense is bad. There's only, I think, 7 teams worse than they are, and yards on the ground given up per game, and not the worst Power Five team. Mississippi State is the worst, I guess, Power Four team at this moment. They give up 213 yards a game, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's. I think that CJ great game against Pitt, breaking tackles, doing what CJ does. But the lack of explosives in the running game has been a huge disappointment, especially Jaheim. Not totally surprised. Again, sophomore slumps are real. You're adding more to their arsenal, trying to add more to their arsenal. And then the defenses, they see your strengths and weaknesses all off season. They're gonna find ways to try to slow you down. So again, some of this, just like talked about earlier, you get in your head and you get slowed down. And that is 100% what some of the reason why there's a sophomore slump. And you just hope by a week he can just start doing less thinking, and it's more reactionary, and he can just get upfield because again, the lack of explosives from the running game, especially from Jaheim, has been a disappointing area.
The one thing I love that Chad Scott said before, it's kind of funny. He's like, I want my guys to have goldfish memory, especially running backs. Like you don't want them thinking too much, especially there because you've got to just, play fast, go downhill. You can't be thinking or hesitating in your runs unless you're like freaking Le'Veon Bell and you can dance all day in the backfield and then go. But that's like a unicorn type thing. Not very many guys can do that and have success. But for Jaheim White, like he's somebody that's just got to hit the hole and go, and he hasn't really been able to do that. Teams have been bottling him up. So going over to the other side, West Virginia and their defense versus Oklahoma State's offense. This is going to be a tough challenge because, like you said, they get the ball out quick. They've allowed one sack as a team all season. A lot of that's just byproduct of getting it out fast, but their offensive line is good. So this is kind of an interesting strength on strength matchup in the trenches with West Virginia's defense heading into week 4 last week, led the country or were fifth in the country in quarterback pressures. TJ Jackson led the country in individual pressures going up against this Oklahoma State defense. You're not going to get home a whole lot, but you can still affect passes. You can still affect the pocket. So what's the biggest concern for you? I mean, because the secondary has been a nightmare at times, but Ollie Gordon himself can be a nightmare. We saw it last year in Morgantown where he just ran for what, like 100 and some yards in one quarter.
Yeah, he's also the reigning Big 12 Player of the Year. He's struggled. He's only hit the 100-yard mark once, and that was in the season opener. I think he's averaging 66.8 yards per game at this point. So he's only had one 100-yard game. And I think that's really where it starts. If you can he had, I think, 72 yards in the first quarter against Kansas State, and then he ended up with 76 um, total on the day. So he had 9 carries, 72, another 7 carries throughout the day. And there's, obviously, no Brown kind of alluded to the fact that he probably got a little banged up
Yeah.
last week. And that's going to happen when you play Utah and Kansas State back to back weeks. So I still think you have to stop Ollie Gordon first. I think you have to force Bowman to make plays. He's shown that he can't really thrive under pressure. Of course, last year he was darting all over the field and threw passes that were good on his receivers could get to. So he's capable of doing it, but only a 60% chance. I think you got to kind of pick your poison there and just stay up close to the line of scrimmage and force him to make plays downfield. Now, saying that, the secondary hasn't done well on deep passes a lot of the time. So, uh, it's definitely one of those offenses that hasn't shown a lot, but and Bowman's averaging over 300 yards passing each game. So they've struggled to kind of find the end zone at times as well. So, if you can control or can try to contain Ollie Gordon, obviously you don't have to necessarily stop him early. But like you said last year in the fourth quarter, I think he had over 140 yards rushing in the fourth quarter last year, and a lot of it was just
Yeah.
a breakdown defensively, and kind of got
Misfitting
they,
things.
they isolated some of the defense where it's just one-on-one matchups, and they didn't win it, couldn't bring them down, and that's exactly what you expect from the Big 12 Player of the Year. So I think if they can kind of limit those situations where he doesn't have one-on-one matchups quickly on the outside, then I think they can have success. And really, it's just about slowing down the RPO, and I think that's really where Hollis can use his man press to kind of disrupt the timing. And if you can disrupt the timing enough, because those passes are out, they don't really drop back. It's just kind of sitting there. You kind of can hope that the pass rush can kind of get to him and disrupt it enough. I don't think they'll be able to bring him down because again, it happens so fast. But I think you can get hands in the air. Don't allow those passing lanes up front to where you can get those slants, where they work those kind of deeper slants. If you can just kind of close those holes a little bit, get a hand in the air, it'll definitely affect the passing, and then that should create opportunities for takeaways and there will be opportunities for takeaways because Bowman again has struggled. You
Yep.
have to bring it down. So it goes back again. Take care of the ball, win the turnover battle, get some takeaways. As cliche as that is, you're going to have, especially on the road in the Big 12 Conference, you're going to have to create something defensively. And if you can't get to the quarterback, you're going to have to find ways to get the ball quickly. And a takeaway, an interception, a fumble, which is going to be hard to get from Ollie, but something to get some juice and give your offense a short field to work with.
I'm really curious to see how Jordan Leslie plays this because even though the offense hasn't been great for Oklahoma State, it's kind of a pick your poison type thing. Like, you're playing with fire if you're loading the box and leaving your secondary kind of out to dry, so to speak, and putting some of those guys on an island. But you also don't want to give you so much help in the back end where you lighten the box and you're daring Ollie Gordon to run right at you. I don't know how you defend this, how you play it. I don't know if they're going to have a lot of nickel packages in the game or if they're just going to play, load the box and say, we're going to dare you to throw it. I don't know. Maybe that is the best way, especially to get the ball out quicker from Alan Bowman. And sometimes that can play into what the defense wants. Just because a guy gets a ball out quick doesn't mean they're going to have success against you. Sometimes that means he's rushing his decisions. And if you load the box, you can affect him with the pressure. Maybe he has an errant pass or two, and one just falls into your lap. And hopefully, someone outside of Tyron Bradley can make a play on one of those balls because he's the only one that's really forced a turnover this year. But that's going to be interesting to see how he plays this.
Yeah, and again, if you look at the Kansas State game, they kept scoring and putting the pressure on that offense. So don't want to say that Bowman can't handle it because again, he did it last year at West Virginia. Of course, they had some help there with the turnover late, but he threw darts.
Yeah.
If you go back and look at that game when they came back and they were trying to stop Gordon and they were had one-on-one situations, they were right on the money. Like you couldn't defend it much better than what they were defending it. They were just perfect passes. So he's capable. Hopefully, he doesn't save his best for West Virginia again, and they can kind of take advantage. If West Virginia offense, again, I still think you got to outscore your opponents with the offense. Like I don't think you can really rely on the defense at this point to make stops because they did it against Kansas. But when you think about that game winning, it's like they're already across midfield at that point. So you're going to have to score. And if you can kind of put pressure on them, especially early with your offense, I think it can lead to turnovers early. And you see it every week at this point, whether it's NFL or college, no lead is safe. So they can't get
Saw
conservative.
it with Jordan Bama last
Yeah,
week.
you can't get conservative offensively. You got to keep the throttle down. And if these kids don't realize at this point, when you're seeing comebacks week in, week out all across the country, there's a problem. And it's not just a West Virginia problem. It's everywhere, obviously. So yeah, keep the throttle down offensively, and it's going to help your defense because it's going to force Bowman to have to make plays and force these guys to have to make plays, and they'll lead to mistakes.
Number one key for the defense in this game, or really, you can take this defensively, or you can just say number one key overall to beat Oklahoma State this Saturday.
Uh, Kind of the same thing he did with Kansas. I hate the philosophy, but right now, bend don't break. Keep
Yeah,
everything in front of you. If you're keeping everything in front of you, it's going to limit the explosive plays, higher snap count. Yeah, it hurts time of possession, but again, that gives you more opportunity for them to make a mistake. Bowman is only throwing 60%, and I think it's four of his interceptions have come in the last of his six interceptions have come in the last two games. He might actually have more than that the last two games, but he's thrown a
he was
lot.
bad against Utah,
Yeah, so
really bad.
he's throwing interceptions at a high clip in the Big 12 play. So again, Virginia, the secondary has had opportunities to make interceptions this year, most notably against Pitt. If they can drop that one, that would have been a 99-yard pick six. Like when the ball's there, you got to get it. Like you can't let those plays fall through your fingertips like that. Like this can't happen. So especially on the road. Again, that was a road game. Definitely needed. Ended up as a touchdown. That was a 14-point swing. Got to have those 14-point swings in your favor on the road, especially a program like Oklahoma State. Mike Gundy, like those boys are gonna be ready to play. This isn't gonna be a letdown for them because they still have Big 12 championship aspirations,
Absolutely.
and they can still make a run. Utah just like there's losses are starting to stack up in the Big 12, and it's just another year where everyone's kind of beating up with each other. They may not be a great team, but all of a sudden, Cincinnati looks a lot better all of a sudden. Texas Tech's looking a little bit better all of a sudden. They may not be consistent every other week, but they're going to come up and bite some people.
BYU coming out of nowhere, freaking
BYU's looking really good.
golly.
Kind of what you expected BYU to be when they came in the conference. Need that year adjustment, boom, they're right where you expect them to be. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of infighting here going on here within the conference the next few weeks. An opportunity like this where you got Oklahoma State reeling, make them force issue, take the ball when you can and make a play.
The one thing I've learned is to never write off Mike Gundy. I've tried to do it the last 2 or 3 years, and I said it after last year that I'm not doing it again because I was almost certain after what I saw them do against South Alabama, and they got crushed. I think it was like 33-7 at home against South Alabama. And then they lost a Big 12 game, and they had 2 losses early in the season. I said, this team is exactly kind of what I thought it was going to be. It's going to be a 6-6, 7-5 type team. They ended up bouncing back. They got all the way to the Big 12 championship game, I believe. So never write off a Mike Gundy team. And I mean, if you're them, I mean, you kind of look at this situation, you think this is kind of a get right game, especially offensively. So hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully that's not the story on Saturday when we recap that one in the post game show. But as always, make sure you hit that subscribe button here on YouTube at West Virginia on SI. Follow us on our X account, SI_WVU. One more reminder, the walkthrough game day show tomorrow with Eugene Napoleon. We break down this game, give our picks for the week, and talk some other things around college football. So that'll do it for us. Here on the show, we'll be having the morning after show on Sunday to recap the action. So we'll see you guys here tomorrow on the walkthrough game day show.